Live Patriots Beat podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Spagnoli. As always, Alex Barth. Barth, take two. Let's do it again. Let's try again.
Yep. Yeah, I just blame the McDonald's Wi-Fi for that one. If you missed it, I had to try to do the show from my car. There was bad traffic, and it was a mess.
You can blame me. We kind of had to do some jumbling around for scheduling purposes. Barth was a trooper. Certainly, pulled some strings, did a lot to make that work, and unfortunately, it didn't. But we're here. We're here on a Victory Tuesday, the first of the year. Couldn't miss a show.
Yep.
Couldn't push it back. However, let's get right into it. I thought it was a pretty good game from the Patriots. I thought from start to finish, right, there's still some things to clean up. I thought, again, they had a good start, opening drive. That they resulted in 3, right? They scored in their first drive, field goal.
Yep.
Right? So I thought another good opening drive. Obviously, that's typically scripted, right? So that's good preparation on their part. Defense made some big, timely plays. But overall, your thoughts before we can kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, I think big picture, I mean, they did what they needed to do to win. It's a good, and this kind of echoes what some guys said after the game. I think it's a good starting point, right? It's certainly, you hope that's not the finished product. If that's the finished product, you're going to be in trouble. But I thought, you saw significant improvement from the offensive line. That was kind of my biggest takeaway. Nelson Aguilar seems to, have found a little bit of a rhythm here with Mac Jones, which is exciting. Still, waiting for Mac Jones to look a little more comfortable. I said last week after the Dolphins game, people were complaining about Mac Jones' performance, and I said, if Mac Jones was their biggest issue, if his performance was their biggest issue in that game, we'd feel pretty good about where they were at. Well, here we are a week later, and that's the case. I think at least offensively, Mac Jones' performance was their biggest issue, but it seems fixable. I just think he's still sped up. Now, the offensive line played much better, but he's still throwing off his back foot, which is leading to some of the arm strength issues.
I'm wondering, too, how much is the back involved, right? Because it did seem
that
he wasn't
could be
really
some of it,
putting
too,
a lot into his throws, right? The arm strength.
Well, that's thrown off the back foot.
Right.
I think his reads are sped up, too, as well. You remember the one on the third down where he just kind of forces the ball to Jonnu Smith, heavily covered in the flat, when he off the line, when he had Jacoby Myers open in the flat. That's a play where last year he makes that read. I think he's just not sure of how much time he has. I think it'll do him good to go back. I assume he's already done it at this point. Go back, watch the game film, see how the offensive line held up, and kind of know, hey, all right, I've got that time back again that I had last year. There's still some things to work out. I thought some of the defensive coaching was actually interesting in this game. There were some decisions that didn't make a ton of sense to me. Still waiting for Devante Parker to fight for a 50-50 ball. We're 2 weeks in, still haven't seen that, but a good step, I would say, in week 1.
Yeah, and I thought even that pick, right? I mean, Max throwing 2 picks, both of them are targeting Parker.
Yep, on 4 attempts to Parker.
Not a great ball, right? That ball's probably got to be a little bit more.
He shouldn't have thrown that, but Parker can do more.
But Parker's got to feel that safety, especially Minkah Fitzpatrick. You got to know where he is at all times on the field, right? So, I wouldn't entirely put that on him, but he's been a big. I don't want to say disappointment. It's only been 2 games, but you thought you'd see a little bit more, especially in that aspect of his game. That is his game. That's his bread and butter. That's something that has made him effective in the league throughout his career, right? So, you're right. I think Mac's a competitor. He's a competitive kid. I think he's an honest kid. He knows what good football looks like from where he's came from. Alabama, a good high school program, right? Been around a lot of good players. I bet when he went back and watched that game film, he's going to realize, I left some plays on the field. I missed this read. I got to get rid of this ball then, right? So I'm not worried about him, right? And I think the back injury too, as much as you say he's fully healthy, he's good to go, that lingers, man. That's going to carry with you. I'm not saying the entire year, but there's no way he wasn't feeling that on Sunday. So that obviously has to hinder. And I'm not making excuses for him, but I think the biggest thing was they improved from week 1. They were battle tested. They were able to close out that game and get some timely stops again from their defense. I think what's lost in the first 2 weeks, with how bad and inconsistent they played on offense, is really how good this defense has played. They haven't gotten a ton of pressure, maybe not as much as you'd like, but the secondary, which I thought was probably their biggest question mark on that side of the ball, has really rose to the occasion, has played some good football the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, they really have. And I don't want to give I don't want to say give him no credit because of Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky does suck. The Steelers have some good pieces around him. I like
Right.
Najee
Tough covers,
Harris.
man. Some tough covers.
I like Deontay Johnson. I think Chase Claypool might be, league wide a little overrated, but he's still a very good player. Freiermuth obviously is a stud. So give him some credit for that. Honestly, my biggest takeaway from the defense this week, and we can get into what they did against Pittsburgh. Certainly that's the point of this show. But my biggest takeaway from the defense this week is look at what Miami did against Baltimore, right?
Right.
And how the Patriots contained them last week. And maybe we put it a little too much in the, hey, Tua can't throw basket because he threw better. I that might not have been the case. They may have been better than we realized. But yeah, the defense, I thought the secondary showed up well, despite maybe not getting a ton of help from the coaching staff. I have no clue why Miles Bryant was the matchup on Chase Claypool, especially after Bill Belichick compared Chase Claypool to Rob Gronkowski earlier in the week. Jalen Mills on Deontay Johnson was another interesting matchup choice when Jonathan Jones had been playing on the boundary. I thought it was for, a spot exactly like that. But they showed up. They made plays. Even Bryant in what was the top matchup made some plays.
Right. And speaking on that too, like you'd probably know better than me if maybe it's in front of you. I'm interested to see how many defensive snaps Miles Bryant played because I think we're done with this experiment. I mean, it's no disrespect to the player, right? I think it's a good story. Undrafted guys certainly plays hard.
Miles Bryant played 83% of the snaps. He was their second most used corner behind Jalen Mills, who played 86.
Like, that's too much. And as a punt returner, like you drafted Marcus Jones. This was our point earlier coming out of training camp. You drafted Marcus Jones, a top 100 pick. You see his college tape. It's electric. Punt returning, right? I tweeted that out today. You want to fix their special teams and, this punt coverage and all this. Get him out of there. Like, he can't do it. I think there's a guy on the roster that's probably the best one to do it. I don't know if he doesn't have the trust to do it. I don't know if he's not performing in practice. That stuff we don't know. But it's time to switch this up. You took this guy in the third round, and he's yet to play. Healthy scratch on Sunday. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, they clearly trust Bryant. I think Bryant's and I like Miles Bryant. I think that there is value in having him on the roster. I don't know that, an 83% usage rate guarding Chase Claypool is that usage or is the role. But yeah, they like him because he's a good. It's kind of like the reason they like Jelani Tavia. He's a technically sound, high IQ, safe player, a guy who's just going to execute his assignment.
That's always a step behind. That's always a step behind.
Well, that's the thing. They would rather the guy that's always a step behind than maybe tries too hard to get the step ahead and get beat, right? Like Chase Winovich, for example, I would say is the other extreme of this. Yeah. And they generally prefer that more conservative approach. Again, I do think I don't want to compare Miles Bryant to Jelani Tavai. I'm kind of regretting that. I think there is a role for Miles Bryant on this team. It's just not covering burners and it's not covering, the massive, big receivers. It's covering the more technical slot guys. Like if they were to play, just because I was watching them the other night, like Sky Moore from the Chiefs, right? A guy like that.
If you said Isaiah McKenzie, I'd be like, please don't.
No, Isaiah McKenzie's a speed guy. That's why you drafted Marcus Jones. But Marcus Jones is a younger player. He hasn't seen as much football. Some of those craftier receivers, maybe the more veteran slot receivers. I honestly like a Jacoby Myers. If the Patriots were to face Jacoby Myers, I would say Miles Bryant is probably a better matchup for him than Marcus Jones at this point. Marcus Jones in 2 or 3 years will probably be a better player than Miles Bryant. You'd hope. I would think that that's the goal. That's why they took him in the third round. I do think there's a role for Miles Bryant. I just think that they're giving him a little too much. And yes, I do want to see Marcus Jones more, both on defense to help contain the speed. And look, the Steelers don't have a ton of fast receivers. I wasn't against them scratching him for Shaun Wade last week. Again, the usage bugged me, but I got that one. Next week against Baltimore, Marcus Jones needs to be on the field. They need as much, and we'll get into that, in the second show of the week. They need as much speed on the field next week against Lamar Jackson. But yeah, I want to see Marcus Jones more on defense. I want to see more on special teams. Even beyond that, though, if they're not comfortable with Marcus Jones returning kicks, and I know he was kind of up and down over the summer, Jabril Peppers is still here, who was a borderline all-pro punt returner before he hurt his knee. I know they said they're trying to ease him in, but I was very surprised Miles Bryant was back after that first punt. I thought we were going to see Jabril Peppers. They don't have to give – I would just say they don't have to give Marcus Jones a shot right away. I think maybe they're a little trigger shy because of what happened with Cyrus Jones, but it's got to be somebody else. I would say Jabril Peppers, but it's got to be somebody else.
Yeah, it's just the experiment's over, and like I said, it's a tough job. It's probably arguably the toughest job, right? I mean, I guess you can sit back there and wave a fair catch every time, but that's not really going to help you. Um, but speaking on Bryant, and I don't want to get too much into the Ravens. We'll save that for Thursday when we're back on regular schedule. By the way, I can't share the comment, but WH had said Miles Bryant would low key be a good spy on Lamar Jackson. What kind of looking ahead, is that you think that could be a role for him this week? It's kind of interesting. They've used a variety of different guys facing dual threat quarterbacks, but I think Lamar is so unique and different from a lot of those guys because he can truly like take over the game with his legs. So you can't really you can't have the spy of like a Van Noy or a Jamie Collins that you had before. You kind of need a smaller, faster, kind of a physical slot corner to spy a guy
Yeah,
like that.
not smaller. Do you remember who the spy was when they shut him down in 2020?
Was it Uche? He had a
It's
bit. He
Chase
played a lot.
Winovich.
Was it
They
Winovich?
took
Really?
Chase Winovich off the edge and put him at the mic, and that was the best game Chase Winovich ever played with the Patriots. And it's going to be hard for him to top that game down the road, right? So to me, if we want to go down the road, and we'll get into this more, later in the week. It's Mac Wilson.
Yeah,
Beginning
that's
into
a
discussion. It's Mac
yeah.
Wilson. This is why Mac Wilson's here. Mac Wilson's here to shut down Lamar Jackson and those scrambling quarterbacks. There's a reason he played a lot more this week than he did last week. So, could Miles Bryant, could Marcus Jones be a spy on Lamar? I think that there's elements where they're going to have to
They
help in
got a
the
lot of
run game,
speed.
maybe in
Duvernay
zone
and
stuff. Right.
Bateman.
Yeah. And those guys, they're not, I mean, I don't think Lamar gets enough credit for how physical of a runner he is. And that's
Oh
probably
yeah,
the irony is that's probably ultimately going to be what cuts his career short. You look at what happened with Cam Newton, but you need, Miles Bryant has struggled as a tackler. One of the biggest knocks on Marcus Jones coming out was his tackling, was just getting to a ball carrier in open space and getting him in the field. That's the last guy you want one-on-one when
an open field. Oh yeah,
Lamar Jackson has his hand on the football in the open field, right? So give me a linebacker. Again, I think it's Mac Wilson, but those guys will play a role. I think again, Marcus Jones, you still got to have the speed on the field. You got to have guys who can hem him in, force him to cut back, etc. I think Marcus Jones should play a good amount next week.
you'd hope so. And like you said, they're playing the younger guys. It's definitely more than we'd seen in the past, which is good to see. But that's a guy. Maybe it's something we don't want to mess because, like I said earlier, that secondary's been really good. It's better than I had thought, right? And I think Jalen Mills had a pick obviously off that great play from Mac Wilson. That obviously, I think a lot of it starts up front with how athletic they are, more athletic they are up front. And it's funny they bring back Jamie Collins today on a free agent visit. I was curious.
Yep.
I'm all over the place right now, but they typically, when they bring those guys in, especially guys that have been linked to them before, they sign them. So I'm curious if that comes through the pipe tomorrow. Jamie Collins is back, and what that means for that core front seven, kind of what they're building there. I'm curious. Was he signed this year? Did he get cut?
No, his contract expired last year. He's been a free agent since. He visited with not the Ravens, the Raiders, McDaniels. He visited with the Raiders earlier this week or last week, within the last 7 days, right? So there's some movement there. He's a guy like I don't know how much he has left. His athleticism is what makes him a great player, and you can kind of tell. What is he? I think 30, 31, 32. You can kind of see that age starting to show.
Played a lot of
He's
football.
right. He's a guy I wonder if they take advantage of these new practice squad rules. Be a valuable guy to have in the locker room, valuable guy to have in the film room. You stash him on the practice squad. If you need him for a game down the road, you have him, you activate him. I'm not opposed to getting him in the building, but I mean, who's he playing over? We can go through. I have the linebacker usage right here from last week. Matthew Judon, 81%. That number honestly should probably be higher. Mac Wilson was their second most used linebacker at 64%. He played more than Juwan Bentley, who might have been dealing with an injury at 60%. Still not playing Collins over any of those guys. Josh Uche, 34%. You can call that one a wash. I guess you could give him Uche's role, but what's the point? Jelani Tavaya played 24%, but the role, I know people say, yeah, Collins over Jelani Tavaya. He's not, it's a different role. You're not going to have Jamie Collins do what they're having Jelani Tavai do. You're not going to have him run downhill and stop the run. You're just not going to do it.
Right.
Raekwon McMillan only played 20%. He was hurt. That number is going to increase. So that's another guy you need snaps for. Anthony Jennings at 17%. Maybe that's the guy, but who are you cutting to open up that roster spot for 17% of the defensive snaps without really a special teams role? Unless somebody's hurt that we don't know of, I don't see it with Collins. Again, would make a ton of sense on the practice squad. Basically what they're doing with Marcus Cannon, but on defense. At least right now, I don't see where his role is on the 53-man roster.
Right. Alex, while we take a little quick break, I want to tell you about our sponsor. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Everybody knows I work on the side. Alex, I'm sure you do too. LinkedIn is the place to find your job. Post it. They're posting thousands of jobs a day for the ability to join. It's a great networking tool. Everybody knows it's nothing without social media nowadays. So it's super easy. You add your job and the purpose hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beat. That's linkedin.com/beat to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Alex, let's jump into the offensive line. We noted it earlier. Much better this week. I thought Cole Strange can look at PFF. I enjoy it. I think those guys work hard. I take a lot of stock in those grades. Sometimes they can be fluctuated. I think okay game. I think the people are so hemmed in on a couple of those clips versus Cam Hayward where he was kind of getting some help and, whatever. But for a rookie, after game one where he was kind of in and out, they subbed him in with Ferentz, and I think it was a matchup perspective, much better for him. I think that's a guy that's starting to catch on. Remember, this is a guy who hasn't really played a lot of, Chattanooga. All credit to that program for producing a talent like that. And I think it's a good D1. You're not going against elite pass rushers and nose and D tackles like you are on a weekly basis. So that's a guy that's going to take a bit. And I think it was a big step in the right direction for a guy like Strange and the offensive line as a whole.
Yeah, I'll credit him for what he did against Hayward. And just to your last point there, I mean, when they played Kentucky, he had one of his best games of his career in college. Kentucky had some good interior defensive linemen. Shout out Marquand McCall, one of the draft crushes of this program back in the spring. Yeah, you have to like what the offensive line did. It felt more cohesive. I mean, you look at some of those plays Strange made that were floating around Twitter, right? Where he's moving and kind of pick the one really great one where he picks up the stunt off Trent Brown coming back to the inside. Guys, he was doing that. David Andrews was doing that. Michael Onwenu was doing that. I mean, we talked about this last week, right? The offensive line didn't feel connected. It didn't feel they were in sync. It felt like 5 individuals, not one unit. Felt a lot more like a unit on Sunday. Isaiah Wynn was really the only guy who stood out to me in any sort of negative way. He had a bad penalty. He got blown up on when they tried that, and it wasn't a great play design, but they tried that quick screen to Jonnu, and DeMarvin Leal got right in off the edge there and nearly picked the pass off. I don't know if that was – it looked like Wynn's first step was back, which would be a very odd design on that play. So, either he got blown back off the ball or he didn't know what the play call was, or maybe it was just a bad play call. But Wynn was the only guy that kind of stood out to me in any sort of negative. I thought Strange was good. I thought the guards were excellent. Trent Brown probably got away with leaving early on a couple of snaps, but hey, they didn't
I
throw the
noticed
flag,
that.
so
Even on the TV copy, you could see.
Yeah,
it was like, ooh,
but
jumped
you know
a
what?
little.
We're at the point where, especially after the way it went week 1, blinders on.
Yeah,
they'll get that cleaned up this week. It's something to watch. It's something to watch. The tackles could have been better, but that's kind of what it was in the summer, where when we talked about the offensive line struggling, or sorry, it's the opposite of what it was in the summer. We'd say the offensive line struggling. Trent Brown looks good, and remember Yadni Kajust at his run, it was the interior that was a mess. This was kind of flipped. I think they can get it cleaned up at tackle. I think Trent Brown can get it cleaned up, especially. So a positive step, certainly a positive step. And that's, I know they didn't have TJ Watt, but they've still got a good defensive front, mostly on the interior. We talked a ton about Hayward. Tyson Alualu, I think, is an underrated player. But I'll give the offensive line credit for that one. They faced a tough opponent and they handled them, and I think that's encouraging to see.
You mentioned it a little bit with trying to hit Jonnu on a screen there. Is this gonna the tight ends is the big not just Jonnu because obviously his issues date back to last year and his lack of consistency and involvement in the offense, but 2 games so far, 7 targets, 3 catches for 33 yards, was held catchless this past weekend. Hunter Henry too. I know they haven't been down in the red zone as much as we'd like to see. He seems like a non-factor. I know that's typically where you see him, his game comes out and where he can really be a strength to that offense. But not only are they not impacting the receiving game, and I don't know how much of it is, kind of the new scheme and what they're running and spreading it out a little bit more, but they're running 2 tight end sets a lot more than they did last year. And those 2 have not been, I guess, living up to the potential of what we had hoped for. Certainly not Jonnu. This dates back to last year, but Henry's kind of he's slowing. He's slowly started. Looks kind of lost out there. Lack of chemistry with Mac.
Yeah, I think with Jonnu, some of that I don't know that was a major tight end game. Just the way things played out. I'm not too worried about Jonnu. I know Mac was 0 for 3 targeting him, but they were good looks. I go back to the one. I want to say it was early in the second half, maybe late in the first half.
And I don't want to cut you off because I want you to talk about this. I don't compare him to the player at all, but I think the biggest thing with N'Keal Harry and his issues were they never really put him in a position to succeed in terms of his strength. Like Jonnu Smith, you watch his highlight tape, that's a guy, get him the ball in space, free him up and let him make plays with the ball in his hands. They've yet to do that through the first, 20 games of his contract here. It's like contested catches and he's running through the seam. It's just, it doesn't work. Like that's where I compare it to N'Keal, where it's like they never really putting him in situations to really blossom in this offense.
Yeah, I think that's a fair parallel. When it comes to Jonnu, though, again, I'm not super worried. I thought he got good looks. It just wasn't there. There's one play I go back to, like I was saying, I don't remember exactly, somewhere in the middle of the game where I don't know if it was a wheel or a slot fade or something, but he's kind of fading up the sideline there. Had the defender on his back. Didn't necessarily have him beat, but had him on his back. And Mac lofted a ball up, and he overthrew him a little bit, but it was a good throw. It was a good look. Either Jonnu's going to catch that, or it's going to be incomplete. It's not really somewhere the defender can make a play on it. If Jonnu does make the catch, he's going to run for yards after the catch. So, like, I don't read a ton into his issues in that game. I think it's just sometimes it's not your day. I thought he looked good as an individual. It just, his role in the context of the offense wasn't there. Jonnu. When it comes to, I'm a little more worried because that's more, I think, what you're talking about. Last year, they were running Hunter Henry up the seam. I mean, that was pretty much his whole game. They were running him up the seam, either out of the slot or in line. Now, all of a sudden, they've got him running these crossers. They're lining him up out wide. Like, his role looks like it's completely changed. And I don't, like, he's not a guy, he's not like an out wide tight end to me. It's just
he's not a Travis Kelce versatile guy, line him up all
that's
over.
Not his skill set. He's got to be going up the seam. Intermediate routes. Again, running him underneath too, it's not his game. They're asking him to do a lot of what he doesn't do. So I'm honestly a little more worried about Henry just because, again, the usage is different than last year. And obviously he was great last year. It doesn't look like they're asking him to do the same things. And that's, it's still early, but that's a little bit of a head scratcher to me.
Right. No, I just something I noticed just over the first 2 games because although Jonnu had the problems last year, right, really getting involved, like Hunter Henry took off from the start. It was Mac's go-to guy down there, and they're running like they're throwing to Damian Harris in the flat on like the 10-yard line. Like, and that's no disrespect to him, but you got Hunter Henry, you got Devante Parker down there. Throw it to your horses. Those big guys that make plays, which we saw last year. It seems like they've got away from that. So enough from the offensive side of the ball. Obviously Thursday, like I said.
I would say one more on the offensive side. I mean, we should talk about Devante Parker. And I know we did a little bit earlier in the show, but we did it in the context of Mac. He played, I have it right here. Give me 1 second. He played 76% of their snaps. He was their second most used wide receiver. That's after being 100% guy last week. He kind of got benched in that game. We didn't see him a ton at the end. And again, I said it a ton on the show last week. I said it during the game. I said it on the post-game show. Mac should not have been throwing the ball near Minkah Fitzpatrick. That interception is certainly in big part on Mac. But for the second week in a row, there's a contested catch opportunity, and Devante Parker ran right through the ball. I mean, he doesn't even turn around to try to make the tackle. He's running. He just looks back. That's it. There's no effort to fight to the ball and make the catch. The defenders are attacking the ball at the high point. I don't like the throw in Miami. I know people criticize Mac for that throw. You throw it at Xavier Howard. Like, no, you brought
He
Devante
threw that
Parker
to a
in.
spot. He threw
Right.
that spot.
You brought Devante Parker in, so that throw is a good throw in your offense. That throw should be a part of your offense. It's a part of most NFL offenses. And then you look at what Nelson Agholor, nobody's expecting Nelson Agholor to be a contested catch guy. But that his touchdown catch, that's going on the teach tape. That was excellent. He's been great. Let's give Nelson Agholor credit too. He talked over the summer about how he felt like he was more in lockstep with Mac Jones, and it's shown through 2 games. He's been excellent. But I'm worried that Parker's going to lose favor fast. We know how wide receivers can lose favor in this offense. It wasn't just a Tom Brady
and
thing.
You got one guy coming who might take him a little bit, but I think when you're lacking that juice, that guy's there, and he's coming.
Talking about Tyquan Thornton.
Absolutely.
Devante Parker's a guy they invested a lot in. Devante Parker's a guy that I think adds an element to their offense that they maybe don't have elsewhere.
A lot, though, when they did trade for him, right? They traded that 3rd round pick.
Yeah, but there's the contract too. I'm saying like they're paying him a good amount
because you get next year control too, right?
Right. I think it's 2 years, and then
could be.
You don't outside of maybe little Jordan Humphrey, you don't necessarily have that element in your offense either. So that's a guy I think they really need to step up. And are they going to keep forcing it to him, which isn't great, or are they going to pull him, which also isn't great because then you're actually pretty small on offense. You don't have a ton of, Jacoby Myers has been running like Mike Allstott, and I love it, but you don't really have that, size mismatch guy, especially if Hunter Henry's going to fade. So they've got to get Parker.
Kendrick Bourne involved too. I mean, this guy every time he's on the field, he makes a play, man. Like it's insane. And Matt goes right to him. He played 40? He played like 26 snaps or something.
Bourne.
He was like the fourth most used.
Bourne was still 5th. Bourne was still 5th behind Humphrey, 38% to 35%. But they got to figure out a way to get Devante Parker going. That's the only way they're going to hit their apex as an offense. He's got to be involved, and he's got to attack the ball more aggressively than he has through 2 weeks. Again, Mac Jones targeting him 1 for 4, 9 yards, 2 interceptions. It's not good enough.
He's 1 catch through 2 games, huh?
Yep, 1 catch on 4 targets. And he
doesn't need to be more.
He doesn't need to be a volume guy. Like I'm not saying that they need to target him 10 times a game.
5, 6 max is probably his.
I would even say 4 to 5, but they need to be big plays. He's your big play guy, and he hasn't looked like it to this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious too. Like they're not there yet, right? It's like there's still so many moving pieces as an offense. I'm curious to see where they can go because the talent's always been there, especially on the outside. Their receiving group's good. It's good on paper. They got guys that can do it, like we've talked about. It's just putting it all together, right? Their margin for error is so small offensively because it's super one-dimensional right now. I think the run game got going a little bit. Ramondre Stevenson had a tough couple, heavy, big-time runs that, dragged on the play clock and, some extra yardage picked up. And Damian Harris obviously did what he did. No concern there. I thought, like I said, up front, they had a much better day. But the defense, too, like I said, they started to get a little bit more pressure than maybe we had saw. I thought they were really – week 1, they got pressure. Tua just made some big throws and got the ball up pretty quick. That's his specialty, right? It's out of his hand, in his hands and out. They got some pressure to Trubisky. They'll have some trouble this week. I think we can break a lot of that down Thursday with the plan to defend Lamar and how they're going to do it because I think it'll be really interesting. It always is versus those quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I mean it's what was it? They asked somebody asked Steve Belichick today, like was planning for Tua and Trubisky good prep and planning for Lamar because all 3 can run. And he started saying, like, Lamar is a different. He caught himself saying, "Oh, those guys are good too," because how the Patriots are. But no, I thought they played well. Again, we talked about this earlier in the show. I think the secondary really stood out to me. I will say up front, the big surprise, and I wrote about this on 985sportsup.com, Deatrich Wise played 90% of the snaps. 90%
Wow.
of the snaps. The only other defensive linemen that played 90% of their team snaps last week were Aaron Donald, Chandler Jones, Trey Hendrickson, and I am blanking on the fourth guy, but he is also a all-pro.
Hutchinson, was he in there? He played a lot.
No, he was like 86. I can try to find it. It was another. So it was 3 all-pros and Deatrich Wise. And this is a week after he played 86%.
Like 40. Oh, 86.
I mean, and Deatrich Wise has been excellent. Like, he's earning all this playing time, right? So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch him going forward. You know, does he play more against Lamar? He didn't. When they played Lamar in 2020, it was one of the games he played the least amount. But that stood out to me, really, is just how good Deatrich Wise looks. And they have him playing the only other defensive lineman.
He had a good summer.
The only other defensive lineman they've used at this rate, the Patriots have in the last 10 years, are Vince Wilfork, Chandler Jones, and Trey Flowers. That's the company. So that one stands out to me a lot. I'm trying to find the list
Max
here.
Crosby?
I think I'm almost at it. That's who it was. Yes, it was Max Crosby. Thank you.
Thank you in the chat. I was going to say him too, but
somebody in the chat have a shout out.
That's another horse. He's a monster. That guy's a
Again, that's good. That's good company to be in if you're a defensive lineman.
I mean, he's not going to put up the volume and the sacks, but you know that's a good amount of snaps. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it on the Pittsburgh game. Like I said, I think a big win for them. Something you could tell that team was like a monkey off their back, happy in the locker room. Right? Everybody's happy after a win, but it seemed like you know there was a special juice around them that we hadn't seen. They looked really. Remember, we talked about it last week, the commitment level and kind of the doubting of the process. It seemed like they got a lot of weight off their shoulders last week. This is another big test, home opener. It's good to get back home, and then we get that October stretch where they can start to rattle some of these off and really start to build that identity and get some momentum for that back half of the season. So that's pretty much it on the Pittsburgh game. Like I said, good win. Could be better. It should be better. I think it will be better. We will see you guys on Thursday. Like I said, that'll be more of an in-depth show on how to stop Lamar. I think it'd be interesting for us to go kind of back and forth. That's a real tough guy to stop and how they'll do it. I'm sure they'll have a great game plan to do it. It'll be interesting to see. So, Barth, I appreciate your flexibility today. My guy.
Yeah, no, we got to. I mean, we weren't going to not do the show. So,
Victory Tuesday, first one. If they lost, maybe I'd have been like, you know what, we'll talk tomorrow. But a W tasted okay. I think they can be a lot better, but we'll take it. So we'll talk to you all on Thursday. Talk soon.